My first impression of Bruce Lee that he was a very confident young man. Ed Parker talks so highly of him as being a very proficient martial artist, well-versed in several Chinese martial arts, and that when he spoke, he took command of the conversation very easily, and he was very confident in what he said and what he performed. I think the thing I liked about Bruce Lee when I was training under Ed Parker, I was very convinced that Kempo was the art for me in Kung Fu. And I think when I met Bruce Lee, what changed, it was everything he did and performed, he proved it. And at that time I was really brainwashed toward the Kempo system. And I think Kempo is a really good system. But with Bruce Lee, what made him is his precise movement. Things he told me were not fully accepted at that time period. The footwork, the way he trained, the use of the equipment, which was very few people at that time period use equipment in the training. But I think that's the basic thing, that he was so way ahead of his time. And as I studied with him, every day I found out that he was definitely way ahead of his time, particularly for that time period. Bruce Lee was, if I can say that, if he had the drawback maybe of he was quick-tempered and a little impatient. He wanted you to get the information really, he really wanted you to get the information, period. And if you didn't learn quickly, he sometimes would go right on to the next subject matter, because in my opinion, he was actually reviewing for himself also. Because when you teach others, you kind of teach yourself. The Greeks said that also, but his was like he would be teaching, and I know really he's running it through his mind, what if it's possible, and he's sort of bouncing it off on me. Everything he quoted sort of fit his martial art. When he said, be soft, yet not yielding, firm, yet not hard, he would show a technique in which he was soft, but yet he wasn't firm. He was hard, but he was actually in control of the situation. So his philosophy really matched what he said. His structure in the class was mainly what he wanted to cover for that day. And for me, the period, most of our workouts were like anywhere from 2, possibly to 3 hours. And even on the short ones, like an hour and a half, we would first go through the basics, basic footwork. Mobility was very, very important to him. So he had agility exercise, he had balancing exercise, he had coordination exercise, he had hand dexterity exercises, he had what he called economy of motion exercise. He had form practice, but not the kind of kata that you're thinking in a traditional martial art. The form is what he called the structure. He had exercises in the training for strength, for speed, for stamina, for grace, for endurance. That was Bruce Lee. He covered all the basic attributes that was needed for a fighter. And then he would go into technique. He says, you have no business in martial art if you're unable to do this, conditioning-wise. He says, if you can't do a certain amount of push-ups, he says, you have no business, because those are what he called the main attributes that help you in the martial art. You know, you can know a lot of material, but if you don't have the stamina to do it, he says, then you won't be able to do it. So he placed, I think I'm safe in saying that he placed almost 60% on physical conditioning, on attributes. The other 40% was on technical. In all honesty, he did not want to teach in the Los Angeles area, because he had run into people in the Seattle and the Oakland area where he felt they had sort of wronged him. I didn't really question him on that. So he had no intention of opening a school in Los Angeles. And at that time I said, Sifu, we really should, this is a beautiful art, you should really share it. I think people would really appreciate it, but he still didn't want to. And then about a year, maybe a year and about 3 months, he decided that he would like to open a school. But it would have to be a very selective few in Chinatown, and that he would allow me to teach a selective few. So he did bring in some of his, what I call people in the movie industry, and he brought in, he says, you can bring in people that you like to bring. So I brought in friends that I had in the martial art, mainly people who were in Kempo. And then he made contacts with other people, and that's how we first started Chinatown School. He pointed me because he felt that I believed that I could teach it. However, I made a lot of mistakes on the way and learned to teach. Because I think when you teach, you have to learn to be a good teacher. I don't think you're born with that gift. I think teachers are made just like athletes are made through the training. And you make a lot of errors on the way, which I'm sure I made a lot of errors and learned to deal with it as I was teaching. Jeet Kune Do was always an evolution. It was a work in process. It never was the same. When I first started with him, he actually taught me forms. He taught me, I remember, Southern Mantis form about 1/4 the way. He taught me a Northern Mantis form halfway. He taught me Cholet Fat form. And that lasted for about a month, maybe a month and a half at the most. And then he would teach me basic kicking, punching. And then, of course, he would teach me Wing Chun. And then he said, okay, it's not in the form, so he started change. He would change, and I think I'm safe in saying that almost at that time, the first year he taught me, almost every month, the curriculum was constantly changing, sometimes very big, sometimes very little, but it was constantly changing. It was never the same, you know. We did a lot of training. In the beginning, we did a lot of sparring, hard sparring, and then he learned how to train that so he wouldn't hurt me, because literally he was way beyond my physical level. But I think I was very durable, so he liked to work with me a lot. And then he had a lot of focus glove drills, which he developed, and that was always constantly changing. In the beginning, we only used the focus glove for punching. He started to adapt it for focus glove. His changing, I introduced him to the football kicking. They didn't call it football kicking shield. We call it the kicking shield. But nobody at that time was putting things like that on the market. So I brought in a shield, foam shield, and an air shield to have him feel for kicking and for punching, which in the beginning he didn't like, and then come back the next week and he'd have a bunch of drills on the airbag and on the foam shield and on the forearm foam shield. And that's the Bruce Lee I knew. There was constantly, he was a work in progress, constantly experimenting, constantly researching, you know, and constantly being very creative in his structure. When I demonstrated with Bruce Lee, like my very first demonstration was right after the International. He had phoned me up and he said that Taki was going back to Seattle and he needed someone to dummy. And I said, he asked me if I would like to do it, and I said, I would love to do it. He says, and I'll teach you, and you be my demonstration partner. Well, the first thing I noticed about Bruce Lee, he never rehearsed. In Kempo, we always rehearsed to almost the 10th degree, where you would fall, where you would roll, what punch you would try to throw. And his first demonstration, you just punch and kick, and I'll take care of the rest. I go, gosh, I didn't feel comfortable. It's just, it'll come out. You just punch and kick, and I'll just take it from there. So we never really rehearse. A couple times he said, I'm going to do trapping, and that's about it. I knew that I would punch, or he would trap the hand, and I would just act natural, and I'll just take care of the rest. So that's the main thing he did. He didn't really rehearse on his demonstration, you know. And I always felt uncomfortable with that, because in Kempo we always rehearse, you know. We had routines down and things like that. As he just said, well, I'll just take it from there. You just punch and kick. If I could not hold for him properly in any demonstration, he would just hit my chest. It'll look good anyway, because he's moving so fast that the crowd thought that was just probably part of the way we trained. But he was very, like I said, very spontaneous in a demonstration. He says, if you make a mistake, that's no problem. I'll just take care of it. And I did make mistakes. He just recovered and compensated for when I made the error, and throw me or sweep me or took me down. 3 punches, once in a while a lockup. But that was Bruce Lee. He was just so spontaneous in his approach. I would say he had a natural flair for showmanship. You know, when he walked into a room, he had presence. The minute he walked in a room, he was always in control. He was like center stage, even when he wasn't trying to be center stage. So as far as showmanship, he had great ability. Like, he'd do the 1-finger push-up, the thumb push-up, 2 thumbs like that, and maybe show a couple of Chinese forms. Like, it would impress me. He would do a Chinese set, and he goes, okay, man, I said, I really like that. He says, it's no good, but I'll just show you. And then he would show it to me, and he said, well, that's no good. So that he didn't do it, but that he went through that type of training, that's what impressed me also. So I call that showmanship, that he had a natural flair to do it. Even when he wasn't trying to be it, he had that natural showmanship. The first thing I showed him, as I said, was the air shield and the foam shield we use in football and the forearm foam shield. And then he developed drills from that, like round kick, side kick, round kick, throw the rear hand, throw the hook, throw the rear hand, throw the hook. In that time period, I introduced him to the athletic shoe. And usually at that time period, he liked that. Prior to that time, he always trained in either a Chinese boot or what we call desert boots. And most of the times we train with desert boots. Then we started training in boxing shoes. So he said, let me see. So he took the boxing shoes and he said, let's see how to do it. And then I introduced him to it's called a naval headgear. And he said, like this. So I went down to the sporting goods store and bought 5 for our group. And he liked the naval headgear. Nowadays, that would be outmoded because they got some really good stuff. But at that time, that was just like on the cutting edge of training. I introduced him to the baseball shin guard. That came about because my shins were really hurt, because he would always side kick my shin, even playfully. It was very, very painful. I said, well, I'm going to put a stop to that. So I started wearing sometimes a shin guard on the legs so that when he side kicked me, it didn't hurt. Okay. And then there wasn't any kind of protector in those days. So what I did was take 2 boxing chest protectors and put them together and let him kick me. So I introduced him to a lot of protections. He says, well, I want to be able to go all out, but I want to do it for safety. For your safety, he said, so you protect yourself as best as possible. I introduced him to a finger glove. Basically, the finger glove was used for baton training in Japan. And so he said, no, we'll cut off the fingers a little bit here. And so because he liked it, because you could grab, you could hook the hand, and then you could punch with it. So that became very popular. That became sort of like the prototype that you now see for a lot of vale tudo type of situation. And it's very important to remember at that time period, nobody grappled too much. He was getting into locking on the ground. Not so much grappling, but a lot of punch and kick, and then go into a kind of a locking position on the bottom. But we didn't contest it at that time period. So equipment-wise, he introduced them to like anything from a small baseball. So okay, I'll see something like this. We can use this to roll around, put your hands in and roll around, you know. So anything sport-wise that you introduced him to, he had a way to train with it. Which on medicine ball, he said, this is good. So from the basketball, I went to the medicine ball, so we did a lot of training, which now, you hand the basketball back, and we went to the medicine ball. Then he started developing things like, the only time I really got to hit him really hard was take the medicine ball and just throw it on his gut while he lay down there in this kind of a boat position like this. I could really throw it as hard as I want. In fact, I was very careful not to throw it too hard. I kept saying, no, 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 no. I want you to really throw it. So I could hit him as hard as I want. And it's the only time I could do that is just to hit him as hard. And so he took, like the basketball, but went to more or less to the medicine ball. And I just threw the medicine ball. So those are some of the things that I introduced him. And then stopwatch, the use of the stopwatches, things like that he kind of liked. Anything I showed. And then a lot of the books, I think he used a lot of it in the Tao Jeet Kune Do work, because one of my majors was physical education. So a lot of the books of Curitan and all the different big names in physical fitness at that time period, I just gave him a lot of the books, which he then went further and got more books on these different people. And it's pretty much anything that interests him, he would say, let's do it. And we just, from my standpoint, is that anything I showed him, he always had a different way to train on it.